But here's what I can say is God always showed up. Like our bills were paid, the things that we needed were provided, and it worked out, even though we didn't know what the next step was.
Welcome to the Midweek Motivation Podcast, where we bring practical help for your faith and life. Here's today's episode.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's Midweek Motivation. I'm Jess. I'm one of the pastors here at Westside, and I'm sitting here with a friend, Steve Radie, who's actually also one of the pastors here at Westside.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for traversing all of the things to get here today.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
No, it's good.
Good.
God cleared the way.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a great thing to note today.
Yeah.
Based on our conversation. So that's
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I'm excited. Okay, so I wanted to ask you to join me and have this conversation because we're speaking specifically to the idea that, God gives us what we need for the season that we're in, right? And I don't think that I know anybody else who has as many crazy God stories that they share as openly as you do.
Uh-oh.
Which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you want me to share all of them or just a few?
Oh, man, I wish we had time for all of them. No, but, one of the things that I know that we have in common is we kind of we grew up into our ministry roles here at Westside.
A little different intro than what a normal pastor would come through. So, yeah, when Steve and Gabe asked me to do the residency program, I was like, what is this all about? And so I reluctantly started to fill out the application, and it just kept crashing. So I was like, I don't even know if this is
this a sign?
Yeah, is this a sign? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But finally, everything got through and everything got sent over. And, when as it grew and, we kind of saw the direction that God was leading me towards, I actually left a really, really good job to jump into ministry. And I pretty much just showed up one day on Steve and Gabe's doorstep and said, okay, well, I left my job and let's figure this out. And it was, I jumped in with both feet. But here's what I can say is God always showed up. Like our bills were paid, the things that we needed were provided, and it worked out, even though we didn't know what the next step was. And I say we because Jessica, I drug her with me.
Yeah, your wife, Jessica.
My wife, Jessica. God continued to provide. And I think that, that's super important as we're looking and closing this series and this book. It was so cool to hear the stories that he shared because I'm like, oh, hey, I got a similar story to that, right? I can relate to that. And, the journey through Westside wasn't just to be here, but God was calling me through Westside to do ministry in other avenues. And so when I started down that journey, we inside use the red barn analogy. It's one of the favorite analogies that we have here.
I'll share it so that they know.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you share it.
No, you do it.
Okay, fine. So, we're looking to the red barn, and that's where God is leading us. And sometimes when you're too close to the obstacles, you can't see the red barn. It's not clear. And sometimes you have to kind of take a step back, or you gotta be able to shift side to side so that you can see that. And sometimes when you get to that red barn, it wasn't really the red barn that God was leading us to. He was actually leading us to the white barn.
Yeah.
But he used the red barn in that path, and he's done that several times in my ministry. And where I'm at today, I couldn't have imagined the opportunities that he'd continue to open and provide. I have the opportunity in the place that I work, not only here at the church, but I'm open as a pastor in my job, and I have people come up and ask me to pray with them. So there's just this continuance of, just taking that little step, even though you don't know where that step necessarily is going to lead. God usually fills in the gap. So sometimes it's are you sure that's the step you want me to take?
Yeah.
But the door continues to open. And that's what I've seen along in my ministry, is that just these crazy opportunities continue to present themselves. And I think the biggest encouragement is, just trusting God that, I know that we feel inadequate. I know the book talks about that. In fact, he uses the story in John 21 of Peter.
Yeah, I have that noted too.
Oh, do you? Yeah. So, I mean, there's that crazy journey, and I know you've experienced. You and I have had some conversations where you're just like, is this really what I should be doing?
Yeah.
Am I equipped? Do I have enough? And no.
Exactly. The answer to that question is no.
No, and
that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and you don't know what you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, God does.
Yeah.
And when we allow him to work through us and in us and with us, that's when we get to see the benefit of his glory. And that's what was so cool about that story about Peter. I mean, here's a guy that was chosen, walked hand in hand, saw miracles. And then when it got to be that moment, and he was even told, like, hey, you're going to do this. No, I'm not. No, you are.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
No, you are. No, I'm not. 3 times he denied Christ and then ran.
Hey, just jumping in right in the middle of this podcast episode to tell you about a resource that you need in your life. If you feel ever stuck in your faith, or if you feel like, I want to grow my faith, but I just don't quite know what the steps are, we got a resource for you called Sticky Faith in a Slippery World. I mean, this world is changing and it's crazy, and we all need something firm to stand on. And I wrote a book for you called Sticky Faith in a Slippery World. You can get your copy right now at the link in the description.
But the beautiful thing is, he, even knowing that he failed in that leadership role and in that opportunity, he knew that there was more for him to do. And so he gathered those disciples and he went back to the place where Jesus found him and called him. And he started doing those things. We often in sports, we call it getting back to the basics, going back to the simple things. You learn all these masterful moves like in wrestling, but it's often the basics is where you're solid in your core, and it's just taking those steps.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So through that whole process, would you mind sharing like a moment where you were like, all right, God, I can't do this. You know what I mean? I've had several myself over the years.
Yeah.
And what practically you did, because I think that's one of the most important things, like the takeaways or the things that we learn from those moments that build up endurance and perseverance. So,
well, I know I've shared this story before, as we've now come out of COVID and looking back, I even see more beauty in what that journey was for me and for my family. And that moment was, again, there was the denial, like, is this really happening to me? Like, am I really having to go to the hospital right now? And then the reality sets in of, you need to go. You're that bad off. And then being in the hospital and being alone, and then finding out, my wife had it and there's nothing I could do because she was at home and I was in the hospital. And of course, this was early on. So like you were locked down.
Yeah. Well, and they didn't even really know what was going on at that point.
Right.
Yeah. How to treat it or whatever.
And so many things happened. But that I always go back to this one moment where it was complete chaos. I felt like everything was kind of just spiraling out of control. And I got the phone call and I was talking to my wife and I just got off the phone and I'm looking out the window of the hospital room and, tears are starting to well up in my eyes because I'm like, all those things, all the fears, all those thoughts, all those inadequacies. Did I do enough? Did I, at that moment, they weren't really coming in just to check on you because they had to put on all the gear. But I'm looking out the window and I hear the door of the hospital room open up, and the nurse had come in, put on our gear, and She just walked over to the bed. She had no idea of the phone call that I just had and where I was at. But she just placed her hand over the top of mine and left it there, which was probably in reality like 10 or 15 seconds, but it felt like it was an eternity. And what I realized right then was that God was letting me know through the pain and through the storm that he was present and that he saw me and that he heard me. And I think that as we struggle through these things and we try to go with the calling that God has us and the opportunities, I think we fight all that.
Yeah.
I think that's where our fear really comes from. And it's those reminders that he often humbles us, brings us to our knees, so to speak, or to a hospital bed and says, I'm here. You can't do this alone, but I'm going to carry you through. And I just had this overwhelming sense of peace come over me at that moment. Like it was so surreal. Like it was like being present, but just, watching everything transpire, knowing that it was going to be okay. And I think, as we were trying to do the next thing and realize that God has given us the tools, even when we can't see it, we don't know what his plan is, but here's the beauty of it. He knows his plan.
Right.
And often it's us that's getting in the way of his plan instead of realizing that he's with us and that we have, when we've accepted him to, into our heart, we have that power within us.
Yeah.
He's in us.
Yeah.
And he gives us the strength to do what we need to do. He gives us the notion to carry on when we're feeling defeated or not sure that we can take that next step. The whole point of that chapter was, you got to go back and practically do what you know what to do and let God do the rest. Just get out of his way, go back to those basics, go back to those things like, okay, I'm going to get up today. I'm going to, some days it's a fight to take a shower. Like, I think we've all been there. We've all had those moments. And especially when we feel like God's wanting us to do something and we're battling it, we just have to just continue to take the next steps. And he's not going to show us the whole map.
Yeah.
We may not even see where the foot's going to land sometimes, but he pulls us through and beautiful things happen. Like I think about that moment and what it did for my family. Colby, my youngest son, had to go from in-person school to online school. Yeah. And it was like watching a switch happen. Like when I came home from the hospital after being gone, he had the downstairs set up like a mini apartment. And he was taking care of his mom, taking up food, doing stuff that whole time, fighting through being online, having to be responsible and being online. And then it was like, when we'd ask him to go to the store, he was like, no, I'm good. I don't need to go. It was like all of a sudden this independence, but God used that moment, right? God used all this stuff that was going on to strengthen him and equip him. And now he's a leader over at, with our youth ministry, and he's a shepherd. And he got elected this last year. This is his senior year. He got elected student body president. So I'm watching this kid that was so shy. Yeah. And I watched God just continue to equip him. And so there's where the beauty comes out as I look back on that journey. Like I'm grateful that I went through that, not because it was fun, but because now on the other side of it, I got to look at the benefits of what God did during that. It's like having iron forged in a fire. Yeah. It has to go through that. It has to have some of those tough challenges to really strengthen. Yeah. And I think that's that's where he was going with this, was like, hey, you're going to make mistakes. Think about how many decisions we have to make, on a daily basis, driving our car to turn this road or that road, Yeah.
That makes me think of that thing that John Furtick talks about in one of the chapters. He talks about help me fail. Okay. Like the idea that I'm going to make mistakes, but I want to actually make them well. Yeah. So like Lord, where is it that I can grow? Like, what can I pull out of this? How am I going to be stronger coming out of this on the other side? And I've had so many of those experiences myself,
Right.
where just like totally blew something up and felt horrible about it. And then came out the other side, and God was like, okay, well, you learned this and you learned that.
Right.
And people around me are telling me this is probably the better way to, you know what I mean? And so there's something that we can learn from those mistakes. There's something that we can learn from those like situations that you're sharing, you know, like one of my, I may have shared this here at on this podcast before, but one of my friends told me this thing that was just absolutely beautiful and so encouraging. And that is, in every situation, look for God. Where is God in it? And you're going to find the hope in it. Yeah. And it kind of sounds like that's what you were doing in those situations.
Yeah. It's being intentional to just recognize when those things start to well up, when the anxiety starts to show, when, the nerves are starting to hit, or when you're feeling that pressure.
Yeah.
It's making that mental choice to go, okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to look for God. Yep. I'm going to spend some time in prayer. I'm going to get into His Word. I'm going to go take a walk. I'm going to separate myself from this current situation so that I can clear my mind. Even if you're separating yourself in this situation, that's okay, because God uses those things. Yeah. And when you look for Him, then He reveals the path, and He reveals Him working through. And it's like you said, like, can we fail with grace? Can we take a fall?
A face plant, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. What is it, Rocky? It says it's not about how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true in life, because we never had a promise that life was going to be easy. In fact, God tells us several times in the Bible, when you pay attention to it and you look through the people that God used, like, there was some tough things that happened in their lives and some tough moments, but the beauty comes through what God does with it.
Exactly.
And our spot on that journey, He wants us to be successful. He loves us so much. And I think sometimes we forget that. I think we forget that we're His child. Yeah. And that is where, when we can sit in that and we can look and we can see, maybe, we grew up and we didn't have the best mom or the best dad or the best role model, but someone somewhere along the line showed us what love was, or looked after us and took care of us. And God's doing that all the time. But He's a gentleman about it. And He, kind of go back to that part of the story with Peter going back and going, hey, I'm just going to go fishing again, because this is where Jesus found me. Jesus came back there and said, okay, here's where we're at. And I love it that Stephen Ferg says that Peter wasn't hiding there. Yeah. Peter was just doing the thing that he knew what to do to help him get by until the next opportunity revealed himself for God to use him. Yeah. And I think that's all that we can do, is make sure that we're available and we're looking for those opportunities that God wants to use in our lives, no matter what our situation or what our struggle is.
Yeah. And I think that it's probably worth it to note too that sometimes you may just not even know, which is, I think, where Peter was, like what you're saying. And so the next thing that you can do is just the next best thing. Yeah. And so that's,
Yeah, I mean, think of all the things that Peter saw on that boat. I mean, he was worried about his taxes. God said, "Okay, throw your line out," and catches a fish, and has got coins in his mouth. Cast your net on the other side. Well, wait a minute, we've been fishing all night. There's no fish here, and the nets are almost breaking. And then, of course, the infamous, where Peter got to walk on water. Yeah, granted, he struggled and failed, but again, there was proof in that, right? That's where Jesus caught him. And so I think we have to go back to that place. And I think sometimes even for us in life, it's even getting back involved with church. I know for me, when I find that I'm struggling or I feel myself stepping away or feeling pulled away in the direction. I think for me anyway, to fill my cup and get back into it is some sort of act of service and coming back and going, okay, how can I serve? What can I do to help? And just finding a place in, there's lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
But those things help us take the next step.
Yeah.
Because we get with community, we get back with like-minded people, and that's what God calls us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, he says, wherever two or more are gathered, he will be. And he shows up in those ways, and we get revitalized, and hopefully the encouragement to take another step and get back up after that punch.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I think that there's an alignment piece in there that happens when you just step into the very next thing, like acts of service, especially like around other people who are like-minded. And I think that we can see that in that same story of Peter when, Jesus came back and revealed himself, and he actually he realigned Peter, didn't he?
Yeah,
he's
100%.
like, do you love me? Peter's like, yeah, I love you. Do you love me?
Feed my sheep.
Yeah. Yeah, and just sent him right back on the path and told him what the next thing was. Yeah. So I love that. Just that idea of looking for God in the next thing. And if you can't get to the point where you can see where that is, then just do the next thing that you know to do.
Yeah.
Whatever that might be.
And let God fill you and equip you where you're at. And that's where he's going to meet you. And he's going to give you those things. And that's where the trust is. That's where faith comes in. And just knowing that we have that and having the confidence to respond in it and act.
Yeah. Confidence. God confidence.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for being willing to share your story and for making out here. And man, I love serving with you. You're a blessing. It's awesome.
It is. I love our team. And same with you. We've had a lot of fun, and God's got a lot more for us in store.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Midweek Motivation. To make sure you don't miss any content in the future, please subscribe, share, and if you enjoyed this, give us a like, and consider popping by a Westside service some weekend. You can find out more at westsidecommunitychurch.com.